Don't even think about going after that cup of coffee, Ruth. Hello, my name is Hannah, and today I'm going to be talking about all of the books I read in April. And Ruthie is joining me, as usual, just kind of wandering around, making noise. So, I had a pretty good reading month. I read 9 books, which I haven't read 9 books in a month in probably a couple year or two. So, that much is very cool. The first book that I finished in April was Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk? Olga Tokarczuk. I read it as an ebook on Libby. I picked it up for several reasons. I really liked the cover, and I know that Olga Tokarczuk is a Nobel Prize winner. Unfortunately, I just didn't really get along with this book. It tells the story of a woman in a rural Polish village whose neighbors kind of start dying odd deaths, and she has some really unusual suspicions as to how it's happening and who or what is to blame. This was a weird one because it felt really disjointed, which to an extent it was kind of supposed to be, but it was just in a way that I just could not get into it. There'd be really long diversions about like the zodiac or like really unpoetic descriptions of the landscape of the village, and it just kind of felt like I was waiting for the whole book for something to lock together, and it never really did for me. I will say, however, Janina is a really cool protagonist. It almost kind of reminded me of Death in Her Hands a couple times. Overall, it was alright, just not anything that I think I'm going to be thinking about much further down the line. The next book I read was Real Life by Brandon Taylor. I picked this one up because it was so popular the last year or two whenever it came out. It was shortlisted for the Booker Prize. Brandon Taylor is an alum of the Iowa Writers Workshop, and it is going to become a movie sometime in the future, produced by and starring Kid Cudi. So for all of these reasons, this has been a very popular book. It chronicles a pivotal weekend in the life of a student named Wallace. He is a Black PhD candidate at a predominantly white university, and basically we just get to see in a very direct point of view his thoughts and feelings as he experiences these microaggressions from his classmates and his friends. He gets involved in his friends' drama and his own backstory and his education and his relationships with all of his friends. It was so good. This is kind of one of those books that I don't really have anything to say that hasn't already been said by other people, but it was so great. I really love the prose. It wasn't too flowery or overdone, but it just really, you got a sense of these really big themes, these really major ideas in even like the smallest word or the smallest action, and it was a very impactful reading experience. I absolutely loved it, and I loved the audiobook production was excellent. So yes, big fan, definitely recommend. The next book I read was Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. It takes place in 1984, and it's basically chronicles the 24 hours of the greatest house party Malibu has ever seen, thrown by these 4 fabulous siblings who are all famous in their own right, but also their father is like a legendary rock star. So that's fun. I got to read this as a NetGalley e-arc. This is the first, I just signed up for NetGalley kind of on a lark, not thinking I would really get approved for much, and this was the first book I requested because it's just the first book I thought of that wasn't out yet. And I was approved for it. So big thank you to NetGalley. I believe it comes out June 1st, so it's not a very long wait. I grabbed this just off of the description alone. This isn't necessarily something I would normally reach for. However, in the last couple years, I read both Daisy Jones and the Six and The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and I adored both of them. This was fine. I think it's nowhere near on par with the other two Taylor Jenkins Reid books that I've read. And a lot of that has to do with the characters. What's so great about Daisy Jones and Evelyn Hugo are these really fascinating characters and their relationships with one another. This book just didn't really have the characters and relationships that I wanted to care about. I will say I found the brothers like medium interesting, and their conflict and their plot line. You spend quite a bit of the book kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop with those two, and when it does, it's just kind of like, it happened exactly how I thought it would. Nina, who's basically like the de facto protagonist, is not super compelling. Part of that is written in. A big part of her character and her conflict is that she kind of feels like a bystander in her own life. Like she feels like she doesn't have control over herself or her own decisions. While that's like a reasonable enough internal conflict for a character, it doesn't make for a super compelling reading experience. It just wasn't super engaging. And then Kit just kind of feels like an afterthought, because I think she was. Throughout the first half, there's some time jumps, there's some flashbacks into the early lives of the kids, and also kind of tells about their parents. And these flashbacks somehow felt both like really rushed and like they were way too long. And then the second half, once it gets to the actual party, the party that the book is about, it kind of definitely hit its stride more. But the passages about the random party goers just kind of kept throwing me. And I know they're really helpful to like kind of add flavor to the party and like just add some color to the narrative. But it also was like, I don't know, am I supposed to be remembering this? Am I supposed to be keeping this all straight? Because I'm kind of not. Because you're not really sure what's supposed to be actually important and what's more just atmosphere. However, all this to say, this book is really fun. If you are looking for kind of an easy, beachy read, a summer read, this is it. I read it in like 3 sittings. It was kind of soapy, kind of dramatic, and it was really a fun read. So yeah, people are always asking for like summer reads and beach reads. And if I were book selling this summer, I would be hand selling this book left and right, because this is completely that. And that comes out June 1st. The next book I read was How to Date Men When You Hate Men by Blythe Robertson. I read it as an audiobook on Hoopla. She read the audiobook herself, and I think that it definitely benefited from that, from the author's voice. It was recommended to me by a friend because she cracks a lot of jokes about One Direction, and I love One Direction, and my friend was like, you need to read this because it's really funny. And she was right too. It's pretty funny. Overall, I really did like it, and I thought it was fun, but a lot of it just kind of felt like tweets. Like it just felt like a really fun Twitter thread. I have since followed Blythe Robertson on Twitter, and all of her tweets kind of just read like this book. There's a couple passages. There's one chapter called Getting Serious and another called Making Art that were actually, they were really good. Yeah, the title is definitely attention grabbing, and I might have even like inflated my Goodreads rating, because there are like, you go to the Goodreads page and the first 3 reviews are just people like willfully misreading the title and the intention of the book and just going like, oh, so men cause all problems, which is a really great way to tell us that they have not actually read the book. The next book I read was Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. This was a reread for me in the run-up to the release of Shadow and Bone on Netflix. These books are just so fun. I just really, really, truly adore these books. I was honestly surprised at how different the Six of Crows books felt now, having read Shadow and Bone. I had not read the Shadow and Bone trilogy the first time I read the Six of Crows books. And I'll say, upon rereading and now with my full Shadow and Bone knowledge, I have to say, I love the Matthias and Nina storyline so much. Like, the first time I read it, they kind of felt just like added on. But yeah, understanding, like having a bit more of an idea of her role in the Second Army, in the history between their two countries, that added a lot of depth and a lot of emotion to that for me. So I really liked them. I made another video that is, I entitled it 49 Minutes of Shadow and Bone Opinions, because I watched Shadow and Bone 3 times in 1 week, and then I made a video of all of my opinions, and it's 49 minutes long. So if you want to hear more about my opinions on the show and the books, give that a watch. The next book I read was Luster by Raven Leilani. I listened to the audiobook on Libby. This was kind of an odd one. It's kind of frustrating one, honestly, because it was really stressful, really tense, kind of cringy, like in a really targeted way, and like kind of painful to read sometimes in that way. And a lot of the prose is really beautiful. It's really evocative, and it's just, you know, that's how it gets such a rise out of you. But there were some passages where I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, it was just so bizarre and out of left field that I'm like, I don't know what you're trying to say here. I had a couple examples. At one point, the characters are listening to disco. They actually listen to disco quite a bit. But they're listening to Bad Girls by Donna Summer, and she described it as fascistically joyful. I'm like, what? I know that song. I don't think that's a very fascist. What do you mean by that? Another instance, she described a woman as sexy in the way a triangle can be sexy. And again, I'm just like, expand on that. And Edie is a very frustrating main character. She's meant to be. Honestly, my frustrations with her were not dissimilar to my frustrations with Nina in Malibu Rising, in that she didn't seem to really want anything other than to like be left alone. We knew her opinions on everything, but not really why. Like, there was just like some disconnect. And we got some really good like sprinkles of character with her, but nothing that really stuck. Like towards the beginning, she's getting on the subway and she beats a woman to a seat, and she's like, lucky her pregnancy slowed her down. Like, that's brutal, but it's really funny, and it also tells us a lot about her in not many words. The rest of the time, she either just like, I want to have sex, I want to get hit in the face, sometimes both. So yeah, that was kind of a frustrating read. But I'm very interested to see what else Raven Leilani writes, because I mean, when this book had really good patches and really good moments, it was a super engaging read. The next book I read was Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. I truly do adore these books. I know Leigh Bardugo has mentioned that she plans eventually to do a third Six of Crows book. I am not holding my breath, but maybe one day. But I think it would super make sense to do an additional Six of Crows book, because leaving off at the end of Crooked Kingdom, I didn't super realize it the first read, but it didn't necessarily feel completely final. And the two biggest things of that were, you know, there's still Kaz's unfinished business with Pekka Rollins. You know, he can only get so much satisfaction out of like psychologically torturing him every once in a while. And I had written in my notes that Nina setting off on her own to go up north, and I have since started reading King of Scars, and wouldn't you know it, Nina's in the north. So that much, yes, I was right in noticing that there was more story to tell there. But I also definitely get the sense with these books that Leigh Bardugo is really figuring out how to write with the larger world in mind. Like, she's kind of leaving little breadcrumbs, like even something as small as like mentioning that the girl that Jesper's mom saved is now very powerful. And now reading King of Scars is a character from Novi Zem who's like, yeah, I almost died when I was little. I'm like, Jesper's mom save you? So yeah, I'm less than a third of the way through King of Scars. I'm really curious to see where it's going. I have no clue where it's going. I have Rule of Wolves on my shelf. So, but yeah, Crooked Kingdom, absolutely adored it. It hurt so bad. But yeah, I'm very curious to see how the Six of Crows books are integrated with the Shadow and Bone books in the TV show going forward. Again, I have like almost an hour-long video talking about exactly that. All right, the next book, the second to last book that I read was Mayflies by Andrew O'Hagan. I read it as an e-arc on NetGalley. I'm going crazy with the NetGalley last month and this month, so you'll just have to bear with me for a little while as I like try to get through everything that I got approved for that I wasn't expecting to. It's showing a publication date of May 18th, which is just like this week, but I think it is already out and exists in the UK. This book was so beautiful. It's an immediate front runner for one of my favorite books this year. It tells the story of a group of friends from Scotland. The first half takes place in 1986. It charts basically a weekend where this group, they're all in their late teens, early 20s. They're kind of like on that cusp of adulthood, and they all go to Manchester for a weekend for like the greatest weekend of live music of their lives. In the second half, we rejoin two of these friends further down the line in 2017. One of them calls the other up with some bad news, and it charts another couple months of their lives as adults. Without giving too much away, this book like broke me. It's really tragic. There's also some very funny moments. It has just the most beautiful writing. I plan on sharing actually some of my favorite quotes that I've saved on publication day on my Goodreads, so you can check my Goodreads if you want some really good sad quotes about friendship, because really that's what it is. It's a book about friendship and like how enriching and difficult friendship can be, and how friends can both like better each other's lives and ask a lot of each other, and how even across time and distance, friendship can still be like this very powerful interpersonal force. I wrote a full review on my Goodreads that is a lot more eloquent, because I'm at the point with this book where I'm like, I can't even like talk about it. I love it too much. But yeah, it was also very cool. I made an Instagram post on my book Instagram, and Andrew O'Hagan, the author, liked it and shared it on his Instagram story, which was very cool. I think this book would be really good for either fans of A Little Life who really liked kind of the friendship aspect of A Little Life, or people who were kind of scared off of A Little Life because, you know, the miserable reading experience of that book is so sensationalized. Which isn't to say that this book isn't without trigger warnings. There's definite drug use, talk of illness, lots of talk of death. So yeah, just take care if you do decide to pick this up. All right, and the last book that I read in April was The Borrower by Rebecca Makkai. I listened to it as an audiobook on Libby, and I picked it up because I believe it was last year I read The Great Believers by Rebecca Makkai, and it very quickly became one of my favorite books of all time. I gave it 5 stars. It's an instant favorite for me, which is kind of a bummer because I kind of felt no particular way about this book. Towards the beginning, I had a very slow start with it, and it just felt very like, where are we going with this? I definitely identified somewhat with Lucy's struggle of dealing with problematic parents. She's a children's librarian, and that's something definitely anyone who has spent any significant time working in the children's department of a bookstore will probably attest to. But yeah, I just had a hard time getting into it. I can't exactly put a finger on why. The writing isn't bad. I didn't love the audiobook production. You know, that kind of became a pretty sizable deterrent because it wasn't a short audiobook. But yeah, I just kind of felt like the points that were being made were just not actually being that well supported by the narrative. The narrative didn't grab me, the characters didn't really grab me, but I'm definitely interested in reading more Rebecca Makkai because The Great Believers was so good. But yeah, I just didn't really get along with this one. And once again, I am ending a reading wrap-up on kind of a blah note. So yeah, thank you for watching. Next month I'm at least going to be talking about probably The Road and King of Scars, among others. I'll probably have something else up in between then. But again, thank you for watching, and bye.